I'm curious from a neuroscience point of view and from a psychological point of view, why are some countries, and I'm thinking most notably of like Japan and Singapore and South Korea, able to, at the beginning of the pandemic, make very clear decisions. Japan, masking's mandatory. When vaccine comes out, vaccine's mandatory, travel's restricted, but then didn't shut their countries down, didn't go into lockdown, didn't destroy their economies, have had relatively few deaths, are basically weathering the storm, particularly, Singapore, like is an alternate reality, and New Zealand too. And, why are some countries able to just kind of respond rationally, so seemingly, when others are and people are willing to go along with that more or less, whereas other countries, bounce from one wall to another?
It's a good question, and I don't know if I can answer it fully, but I think it definitely stems from the leader and prior decisions. So if it's a society that has previously become used to very strict controls, then it will definitely step up and follow those same controls that the government is stipulating. I think in countries where individualism is honored, or we see that as being a huge benefit, I think those countries had a bigger problem, because there were too many people that said, no, as an individual, I have this right, and this right supersedes everything else.
Yeah, and we saw a lack of trust.
A lack of trust as well. And I think that is to do with, the previous leadership. If you didn't trust the previous leadership, then maybe you say to yourself, hold on a second, why do I have to listen to them? I don't have to. And I think also probably the infiltration of social media and how social media manipulated the situation. So I think there are a number of confluencing factors that impact, how people responded during the pandemic. But I definitely think it stems from the leader, previous situations. I think, for example, Singapore. I think Singapore is used to a benevolent dictator.
Right.
Under those circumstances, you'd have people that go, okay, we trust this guy. Things have turned out pretty well. I don't have a problem doing this. I think it looks like it's a reasonable request. Other things that have been requested have turned out well. Let's just follow this. But if it hasn't been the case, that's where I think we have a problem. So I think there are a few factors there, Bryce.
It's so interesting.
And I say this to people, and sometimes it has disturbed people. When I used to do in-person presentations, before COVID, I would look at the audience and I'd say to them, I see all of you here, but I also see each of you are a body that's carrying a brain. And they'd look at me really weirdly. And then I'd say, look, what brought you here was your brain, and then I'd go through a little story about that. But this is something that we forget. A leader is a person with a brain. That brain is susceptible to all of the same things that all of us are susceptible to. It's not as if they're immune from biases, that they're immune from brain degradation, that they're immune from poor sleep and not enough exercise, brain aging. All of those things contribute to that brain and the decision that brain is making. So that also is part of the whole discussion. How competent and healthy is the brain making the decision?
That's so fascinating too, because really, if you look at Singapore, more than just a benevolent dictatorship, it's a technocracy. It's really not run by a leader so much as by a team of anonymous people that the people have learned to trust, because they,
it works.
Theoretically make decisions based on rational, logical considerations more often than political and emotional considerations. There's something to unpack there probably
There is
too.
a whole nother podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to The Thinking Leader. Check the show notes for more information about the topics covered in this episode. There, you'll also find a link to our free assessment. Click on it right now to find out if you are a red team thinker with a red team culture.